Welcome to VistaTalks, interesting discussions with interesting people from all around the world. Hello and welcome to VistaTalks, interesting discussions with interesting people from around the world. I'm your host for today, Priscillia Charles, and I'm joined today in studio by Esther Curiel. Esther is for the Localization Operations Manager at Indeed.com, the world's biggest job site. You're very welcome, Esther. We're really glad to have you on the show.
Thanks very much, Priscilla. I'm delighted to be here.
We're delighted to have you as well. So let's move on and get on to the show. So, Esther, I understand that you hold a bachelor's degree in geography and history, prehistory, and archaeology from the Universidad Complutense de Madrid, which actually saw you move into a career in localization. It's quite different. And you were working with Vistatec for over 12 years in all things localization and digital. And in your latest career, you're now the Localization Operations Manager at Indeed.com, which is the world's biggest job site. So let's talk a little bit about your current position at Indeed. You're leading Indeed current effectiveness team. And I understand that it's a multidisciplinary team that focuses on maximizing the impact and effectiveness of Indeed's localized content for global markets. Can you tell us a little bit about your role with Indeed?
Sure. Let me speak a little bit before. I think my career probably it doesn't look very obvious, coming from the kind of history, archaeology background and so on. I suppose for me there is a connection in there because it's all about culture and people, how they think and so on, and whether it's culture across geographies, cultures across times. At the end of the day, it's all the same.
Yes.
So that's I suppose the connecting line in there. That's I suppose how I got into localization in the first place. So I've been in the industry for 20 years now.
Wow. Different
roles, from accounts to project management, program management, managing teams and so on. And then eventually, culminating, I suppose, at Indeed at the moment in my current role. And I guess it goes back again to culture and the language, like they're so interrelated, and communicating and achieving the goals that the content has, for each individual market or culture, and adapting it. And that's precisely what my remit here at Indeed is. The communications need to be very, well, I wouldn't say very heavily, but they need some customization and some culturalization.
Yes.
If they want to be effective.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, in my view, we're just throwing budget down the drain. So that's basically what I've come to Indeed to do. And I'm in the process of building the team for it. So it's very, very exciting times.
Absolutely, I can imagine, yeah. So that's just fantastic. And indeed, I was going to say indeed. No. Indeed, you are... your role is extremely important because the definition and localization, after all, is adapting content to a particular locale. Yes. So speaking of localization, the Indeed website is available in 28 different languages, with over 200 million unique visitors per month. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So we want to make sure the team has an impact, in growing that customer base and making the content impactful for them and continuing to drive the growth of our international markets as well. So we'll do our bit.
I'm sure you do. So Esther, you have a lot of industry experience, obviously, of managing global linguistic quality programs for major brands. Can you expand a little bit on the importance of this for our audience, please?
Quality management. Well, it's absolutely vital in my view. It's the type of thing you really cannot leave to chance, and sometimes we do. We just expect, we outsource or whatever, and we expect it will look after itself.
Yeah.
And we're just risking too much. You can do that with certain types of content. It might not matter so much, but any communication that has high visibility, that has the potential to impact the way you brand is perceived, you really need to put care into that and manage quality very, very carefully.
Yeah.
So it's not glamorous, and no one likes to talk to it. No one likes to, I suppose, invest in it, but it needs to be done. You really do risk damaging your brand if you don't.
Yeah.
And I'd say, like, I take a very holistic approach to quality. Like sometimes, I suppose, as localizers, we tend to focus only on the part that affects language. And in my opinion, we need to start looking as well at like the substance as well, substance and form. So sometimes the messaging, the concepts that work well, say for whatever the source content was created in, for typically a US audience.
Yes.
It's just not going to work. It's not going to matter to an audience in, I don't know, the Philippines or
yes.
Germany or anything like that.
Completely different culture, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we don't look at that enough. Sometimes we tend to localize whatever is produced in the US or wherever headquarters is. It just goes straight to localization, to translation. We don't stop to think, is this going to work? Will my users in these other, in my international countries, will they care about it? And we're very often not measuring the effects and the impact that localized piece of content has. So first of all, we need to start with that decision. Is it worth localizing this piece as it is? And if it's not, what do I want to do? Do I want to create new content? And that's another option that we need to start looking at.
Absolutely,
as well.
Yeah.
And then once you've decided, yes, this is worth translating, localizing, you really do need to measure the quality and keep a look at trends. What are you doing that is working well? Continue doing it. What is not working so well? What's failing?
Yes.
You need to be able to analyze it and draw insights, basically. Like we're collecting a lot of metrics in this industry, but we're not always analyzing them properly and drawing insights that can affect change.
Yes.
So that still needs out of development, I think. But it's a very exciting area as well. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
there's always going to be a lot of work involved and new trends, and I suppose you always have to keep an eye in different cultures. Yeah, it's never ending, but very exciting, I suppose.
Very exciting.
Yes.
Very exciting.
That's great. So so your career has also focused on digital, and when it comes to international SEO, websites and content, what advice would you have?
I'd say absolutely pay a lot of attention to SEO. I have heard horrible stories about people localizing websites. Yes. Perhaps the client being very happy with the quality, having gone through internal rounds of client review, etc. But no one was measuring whether that website was visited, was that content being successful. I was talking to a colleague in the industry recently. She's a member of an LSP, and she was explaining to me how they lost this client despite the client being very happy with the localized content they were producing. At a certain point, the localization team on the client side was told, no one is visiting this localized website, we're pulling it down. And that came as a surprise to the localization person on the client side.
Yes.
So this kind of thing, there's obviously a disconnect in there. We can't be getting these surprises. We need to know what's happening.
Absolutely, yeah.
So absolutely, pay attention to SEO, measure what's happening, keep an eye on it, and pivot, like if it's not working, if you're not getting the visits or whatever it is, find out why, and
take measures.
Take measures, exactly,
yes.
Yeah. And sometimes there might be simple measures, it might be just making your titles more catchy,
yes.
or, promoting a little bit more on social media, there's ways. But if you don't know that it's not working, you can't fix it. You'll get the surprise.
You get the surprise
when it's too late,
and then you lose a bit of your audience. And yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely. Okay, great. That's very useful advice. And coming back to your role at Indeed, you've been expanding the team. And do you have any advice for people building and managing a team of on-site and remote people in this fast-moving industry?
I've been extremely lucky at Indeed because I've had the opportunity to build a team from scratch.
That's
which
brilliant.
It's really an enviable position. Not many people can say that, I imagine. So for me, it was very important. I suppose I want to practice what I preach, so find out, put the groundwork, I suppose, into finding out what is needed from this team, what do I need them to achieve, not at a high level, but really down and dirty. What do we need them to achieve
Yes.
for each of the individual markets? What's the problems that we're having in each of those markets? And I suppose help build a profile of what the ideal person for the role is going to be in each of those markets.
Yes.
So I've done that. I've done a lot of discovery internally, talking to stakeholders and the rest of the localization team, but also the people who will be using our content, will be using it to sell or to market,
Of course, yeah, that
etc.
makes sense.
And they've been very, very interesting conversations. You find that there are differences in there, but you can also see patterns. So you start building the profile of the perfect person.
Yes.
For me, in this case, for instance, it was very clear that building a team of just linguists or localizers wouldn't work.
Okay.
I think we do need to expand the way we think about localization, and we need to embrace this, again, the idea of substance over form, or both of them being very close together, and effectiveness, and what's the content going to be used for?
Absolutely.
How are we going to make it impactful? How are we going to make sure that the people it's intended for find it and read it and are engaged with it? So that's the reason why I went for I suppose the team is not just composed of linguists. We have a mixture. We have content marketers, we have copywriters, we have linguists.
That's fantastic.
It's very multidisciplinary,
Yes.
which is very challenging on the one hand, because some of these people know way more about their areas than I do, and managing them. But we're all learning from each other. It's very, very exciting. We can also talk to our stakeholders in equal terms. We understand what they mean. We're talking the same language. We have the ability to understand very in depth what they need, and we have the ability then to optimize our workflows and our processes to meet those demands. And I think what we're doing is, I'm absolutely excited about it. I think it's a bit different from what's being done in many other places.
Yeah.
And it's a bit of in a certain way, a bit of an experiment. But there's been great enthusiasm as well whenever I've talked to internal stakeholders. One thing that is very important, I think, as well, and that I've tried to do, is build collaboration with these teams from the get-go.
Yeah.
So starting from before even I had the team in place, explaining very clearly what my vision for the team was.
Absolutely important.
And how we could collaborate well together, and kind of finding out from them as well how they're measuring success, because I want that to be a very important part of what we do. So our measures of success will be a bit tied to theirs. So we need to collaborate closely on that. So I've tried to build that collaboration from the start. Now that I've got the first few team members, they've started, we're continuing that. They're working very, very closely with our stakeholders. And I suppose, like for any team, make sure that there's a good team dynamic.
Yes, very important.
Sometimes people work in their little
Bubble.
projects, in their little bubble. In my case, like, it's different markets for each of these people. But it's very important that we collaborate and we put our learnings together, because this is going to be very much a learning experience for all of us. We're trying to do things a little bit differently, and there's no best practices. So we're going to have to build them as we go.
Build the practice,
and learn and improve as we go. So it's important that we all put,
effort.
They're going to be finding ways of doing things that work well for their markets. We can put them in common. There will be trends. We might be able to aggregate some markets where the challenges are similar. We can find similar solutions. So this will be very important, keeping that openness and collaboration with other departments and internally.
Absolutely, yeah. I suppose this is by practicing that you learn, and you see the trends, what's working and not. Mm-hmm. And so that's great. That's really interesting. So you're saying that different members of your team have different markets. So how many different markets do you have? So far, do you have like 5 or more 10?
Yeah,
with
so
all the different languages. Are you going to be working on all of the markets?
Yeah, eventually we will. So we're starting. We're just at the very early stages. I took a couple of months first to do discovery. Now we've started hiring based on all that learning, that I did. So we've tailored the roles very, very closely to the need. So at the moment, we've got content localization specialists for our core languages. They're starting, the ones where we have the most business and the most growth. But we will be expanding the team to cover the rest of the languages that indeed localizes.
So far the biggest, and then slowly, yes.
Exactly, yeah.
That's great. So now I'd like to talk about artificial intelligence, which is a big topic.
The topic
at
of the day.
Moment of the
Yeah.
day. Yes. Machine learning, particularly, and in the area of machine and neural machine translation, that continues to improve, and that's becoming a larger part of our activities. Can you tell me what do you think? How do you think it will affect content and localization across the globe?
Content, I'm very interested in seeing the developments here because it's amazing. Like, content is being produced by machines now. There's there's a few companies who are already producing content that is not touched by a human. Alibaba, giving their retailers the ability to create product descriptions and so on.
Wow.
At the touch of a button. I mean, that's content that would have never been created, much less localized. That would be prime content for machine translation, when it comes to going to the international markets. So it's exciting times. I suppose the industry still needs to learn how it's going to deal with it, but there's no doubt, it's here to stay.
Yes, I think
it's developing so quickly now. It's gained so much momentum. So, better be involved and take as much advantage of it as you can. I think it's still at the stage where you really need to be careful with the effort and the investment that you're putting into it against the actual gain. And it mightn't work in all circumstances.
Yes.
Or you really need to have huge amounts of content. But definitely something that is developing so quickly.
Absolutely.
Who knows, in 5 years' time, where we'll be.
Where will we be in 5 years, 10 years? And you're saying that we need to be careful, which definitely makes sense. So do you think we still need first of all, do you think we still need human skills, working with machine learning? And also, do you think at some point we'll be able to, air quotes, get rid of human skills and let the machines take over completely? Or will we never be able to?
I don't think so. I think there's going to be, some of the market that was there is going to go to machine, artificial intelligence.
Yes.
But I think it will be mostly the, very large amounts of content that perhaps would have never been created or localized before. And, help center articles, that kind of stuff will probably be either created by machines, translated by machines. But there's always going to be the more creative type of content.
Yes.
The content that needs to reach your heart, I suppose. It's going to be very difficult for a machine to do that
to know
properly.
Yes, the small phrases and yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah. So I think that's one of the areas I see where linguists could kind of specialize and start. There's going to be more need for it as well, because marketing is changing as well. Marketing and pretty much every aspect of life, really. It's all becoming very customer-centric, There's more and more competition in the global economies. You get competition from local players as well, who are creating the content in that given language. They're not localizing from a different source. So you really need to do something special to get noticed and to stay in the game. And I think that's where the human skill comes in.
Really makes a difference.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we'll continue using artificial intelligence. I think I see it becoming very, very important in the whole area of measurement.
Yeah, to help us.
With a human behind it, interpreting and tweaking, changing the way we work, and making the decisions on how we're gonna reach people's hearts, basically.
Yes. It does make the difference, because eventually it's reaching out to humans.
Absolutely.
So we're talking about marketing. You presented a paper a little while ago on the next frontier in global marketing, social media marketing for international markets. So in this paper, you mentioned the importance of social media marketing and the current status of international markets. We talked about how important it was adapting content. What about international markets with social media?
Social media, I think this is becoming huge in marketing.
Absolutely, yeah.
But there's been very little done in international markets, and I understand, because it's baffling.
Yeah.
Market, it's changing very quickly.
Yes.
It's just evolving at a speed that it's hard to manage it for the language where you create the content originally, let alone thinking about other markets. But it's a huge opportunity. I was looking at some stats from We Are Social from this year, and there's like 300 billion active social media users.
Wow.
So that's where customers are.
Absolutely.
And you need to go and find them there. So, there's just too much content out there. They're not going to find you just by magic.
Yes.
So you have to go and meet them in whichever way you can.
Yes.
And that's a very important. That's one of the places where they congregate. Go meet them there. But it does get complex when you're looking at your global markets, because people behave differently in different countries. They don't use the same social media channels. They don't respond to the same, inputs.
Yes.
So you really need to customize that. And also, social media has an added problem and opportunity. It's a two-way channel.
Yes.
It's not just you pushing content out there. It's a conversation between yourself
and the audience, the customers.
Yeah. So that's very difficult to do, with kind of traditional localization processes, for instance.
Yeah.
You can have a combination of some content might be localized, but you need to push something original, and you need to be able to respond to your audience
in the best way. Yeah.
In the best way, in a timely manner as well. You can't be responding 2 days later. Social media moves quickly, and you need to keep your eyes on the trends.
Yes.
Like some channels have lost popularity, others have gained it. They're different from country to country, so you need to take all these
into consideration.
All these things into consideration.
Absolutely. I suppose that's why when looking at your paper, I see that you use the example of channel, for instance, what I'm saying, channel, reaching out to Chinese audiences via WeChat. And WeChat is, of course, one of the world's biggest mobile apps, which is very popular in Asia, particularly in China. So how do you think we can improve the relationship between brands and audience through, for instance, through WeChat?
Well, through WeChat or any other channel. I mean, Chanel were very clever, and many other brands are, have done the same thing, and they're using the channels that are used in those countries. So I think this is where things get very interesting, because we're mixing communication and localization and user experience, global user experience. I think this is going to get huge. It is already.
Yes.
It's a field I'm very interested in. It goes back again to customer centricity and trying to give the client what they need when they need it. So doing a bit of user research and market research and seeing where your customers are gonna, again, where they're congregating and how they're using products, because they might use them differently in one country culture than another. So how are they using them? What are the barriers? Why are they not using them in the way you intended, or not using them at all?
Yeah, that's very important.
Or why is a certain feature not being taken up, whereas it is perhaps in the States? So a little bit of user research in there, goes a long way, because it helps you understand and tailor your international communications.
Yes. No, I suppose it's very important. It does differ a little bit on WeChat, because WeChat is obviously used mostly, I'd say, in this part of the world. But then we have other type of social media which are used globally as well.
Yeah.
So that's two different challenges. But
absolutely.
It is very important. So you've also been present at many conferences, and you've also hosted a panel at Lockwood, the Localization Conference every year, on marketing content at the speed of agile and game-changing times for global brands. So I'd like to talk about the context for this panel, because the context for this panel was how agile methodologies are expanding into the world of content marketing. That's obviously allowing faster delivery of content and campaigns, and obviously resulting in more tailored content over time that hence deliver better on the business's goals. So can you tell us about this area? What do you feel?
It's like content marketing trends are of great interest to me. I've been kind of educating myself around this area lately. agile marketing is really becoming a thing, whether you call it out by name or not. Content is now being produced in a different way from the way it was produced before. Like there's, the prevalence of print media that's
dying.
That's dying. It's. There's still a place for it.
Yes.
But really, digital transformation has totally changed the
exploded
the playing field.
Yeah. Yes.
So you can now do things with content that you couldn't before. It was ecstatic before. Once it was written and out in the world, that was it. You had to live with it. I don't know who it was that said, I know that 50% of my marketing doesn't work. The problem is I don't know which half. So now they know. Now they can measure this and they can see what's working and what's not. They can experiment. They can make little experiments, A/B testing, etc. And they can tweak things on the go and iterate and so on. So that, I think there's a huge potential, for the localization industry to kind of jump on that as well. We're not doing that in global markets. We're localizing the content and then that's it. We're giving the client one version.
Yes.
And that's the version that's gonna be on the website or wherever it is. No one is touching it again. We're not looking at whether it works or not. We're not doing little tests. I'm talking in general terms, I know there's companies and there's people who are looking at this and who are testing different variations of a translation, or they're looking at why things don't work in a particular market, whereas they do work in another, and they're looking at why, and they're looking at, again, iterating, changing little things, looking again. It goes back to impact. Is it being impactful for that particular market? So that's where I think both marketing and localization can work together in there to take those principles from agile marketing. We're taking them already, from agile development, and we're going with continuous localization now. It's kind of the one of the trendy topics as well. So in the same way, we should be doing the same thing for marketing and have those conversations with clients and with marketers that allow us to replicate those principles in our global markets as well.
Absolutely. And you've also discussed how global markets are rarely included in the equation, and the benefits of Agile are reduced to delivering faster localized content.
That's it, and that's such a pity because we're missing on all that part of testing, iterating, and I suppose basing everything on what the audience is going to need, your customer is going to need. That's core to Agile as well. It's customer centricity. We're not bringing that into the localization workflows yet, or not in general,
Yes.
So we really need to start doing that.
Yeah,
we need to do that. Yeah. If we don't do it, someone else will, If it's not a localization, if the localization industry doesn't do it, the marketing industry will start doing it. They'll start looking at the global markets and trying to fix it. So it's the time.
Yeah, when localizers are in the right position to do it, to apply it. Yes. Yeah. I suppose it needs a bit of time, but I'm sure we are on the right track. And are there any other projects or any other areas that you'd like to expand or share with our audience?
We talked a little bit before about machine translation.
Yes.
Just for our listeners, I'd like to let them know Women in Localization, the Irish chapter. I'm a member of the board. We're organizing an event on machine translation and kind of the current status and field of play, So if anyone is interested, there will be a panel of experts and it will be a very interactive discussion. So please, if you're in Dublin, attend because it should be a very, very interesting session. Apart from that, since I'm here, I'll take the opportunity to say we are expanding the content effectiveness team within Indeed. We're going to be looking at adding additional content localization specialists for a number of languages. So just to say, keep an eye on our website, and I will be posting the jobs on my social feeds as well.
On the world's biggest job platform.
That's it.
That's great. Thank you so much, Esther. It was really fantastic. Thanks so much for being here today, for taking the time to answer our questions, and it's been obviously an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Likewise, Priscilla. Thank you very much.
So that's the end of today's show with Esther Curiel from Indeed.com. Please tune in again to see the next VistaTalks show, where we'll be discussing more interesting discussions with interesting people from around the world.